Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the 21st podcast for the Facts Over Feelings podcast. I'm back again here with Trevor Kaufman, and again, we have a lot more sports to talk about. We're going to start off with the final series of the 2020 NBA season, the Los Angeles Lakers versus the Miami Heat. As we talked about last week, Trevor and I both predicted that the Lakers would win. Trevor obviously thinks the Lakers or thought the Lakers would win. I believe you said in 5 games, and
I did.
I think I actually
No, I think I said six. I did say six.
okay, and I think I said
I think I
seven.
did I?
Yes, I think you did because I said
All
seven
right.
games. And
Okay.
just
Okay.
going off that, I mean, a lot of things have changed in the past week. I mean, some players have gotten hurt, which we'll talk about. And the series is currently 2 games to 1 in favor of the Lakers. And Trevor, I just wanted to start off by asking you, what are your thoughts on the series so far, and what is your prediction from here on out?
Um, well, to start with game three,
Yeah.
I think we're seeing a lot of overreacting from everybody. I think we're overreacting to the fact that Jimmy Butler, that was the best basketball game he will have ever played. He will not play a better basketball game in his life than that yesterday, or Sunday night, I should say. So yeah, yesterday. I apologize. Um, what did he have? 40 points, 13 assists, 11 rebounds. I mean that's utterly ridiculous. That is an incredible all-time great performance. And now people are going to overreact and be like, oh, LeBron, the Lakers, they're in trouble, blah, blah, blah. Listen, the Lakers are fine. Jimmy Butler played the game of his life. They won by 11. Also, a couple key stats here just for game three. Lakers had 10 first quarter turnovers and 5 fourth quarter turnovers. The Heat had 3 first quarter turnovers and 1 fourth quarter turnover. So you could argue the Miami Heat got off to a big lead in the first quarter. And then in the fourth quarter, when the Lakers caught them, they broke away due to turnovers. So the Lakers need to take care of the ball, not mess around. LeBron and AD are a little pissed off. I think the media, overreacting this game is going to piss them off. Jimmy Butler trash talking is going to piss them off. But I do love that competitive fire from Jimmy Butler, even if it happens to work against him in this case, which I think it might. But an overall, good game three, great series so far. Nothing's changed with me in terms of the Lakers winning this. I still feel like they'll win this in 5 or 6. But I'll hand it off to you, Ryan, to give your thoughts.
Okay, yeah. I mean, so kind of just to counter your point a little bit in regards to, you don't want anyone to overreact, and that's fair. But I mean, it's worth noting that the Miami Heat were without two of arguably their best four players in Goran Dragic and Bam Adebayo. Both have been out for games 2 and game three, and they won in game three in spite of that, which to me was obviously necessary because you can't go down 3-0 to any team in the finals, let alone a LeBron-led team. So it was necessary to give them a shot in the series, and I think hopefully it energized them. I mean, as you said, Jimmy Butler had one of the best games of his career. Definitely his best playoff game ever. As you said, 40 points, 11 boards, 13 assists. And the Heat just, as you also said, controlled the ball really well. Only turned the ball over 12 times compared to the Lakers 19, and just outplayed them. And LeBron had a good game. I mean, he was 9 for 16 from the floor with 10 boards, 8 assists, and 25 points. Um, it's just Jimmy Butler had a fantastic game, and his supporting cast did well enough. I mean, you had Tyler Hero 17, you had Kelly Olynyk with 17 more, so they did enough, and they won the game. But I think that you can't count the Heat out just yet. I think that if Bam Adebayo, he was upgraded to questionable for Game 4, if he's able to go, I think that Miami could very well win Game 4, and if they win Game 4, I mean, all bets are off. I mean, this is back to an even series, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I will agree with you. Again, I think the Lakers are going to win this series. I think LeBron's too driven, too focused. I know after, I think it was in Game 1, I believe, when it was pretty much a blowout, right, the whole way through. The Lakers
Mm-hmm.
were all like laughing, they were kind of like showboating a little bit, they were jumping up and down on the bench, and I think LeBron was just he had no emotion or very little emotion. He's just like I'm focused on the task at hand. Like this isn't done. Like this is just one game, one win. And I think that he's just laser focused, and I just think he's a man on a mission, and I think it's gonna be very difficult for the Heat to overcome that. But we'll see what happens. Again, like I said, Bam Adebayo back hopefully tomorrow night, and Goran Dragic maybe back for Game 5. So we'll see what happens.
I'm going to slightly counter your counter and say that when Bam Adebayo and Dragic went down, they were already down by 20 in game one. That game was lost no matter if they played or not. And here's what I will say. Here's what I will say. I think I'm not going to argue that the Heat are a better team without Bam Adebayo, but I think in this case, in terms of the matchups, Kelly Olynyk's more of an outside threat than Bam Adebayo, which I think can work to Miami's favor on the offensive end in terms of spreading the floor. And you saw in game two, Kelly Olynyk, I think, had either 16 or 19 points off the bench. And then you mentioned he had 17 in game three. That's because a guy like JaVale McGee, a guy like Dwight Howard, a guy like Anthony Davis has to go out on the perimeter and respect that Kelly Olynyk can pop a three. And with a guy like Bam Adebayo, he's not a very good three-point shooter. He can hit the occasional three. He's an okay at best mid-range jump shooter, but he's not a great shooter in general. So I think for Anthony Davis and a Dwight Howard, that's a bit of an easier matchup just because they're more comfortable with guarding a guy closer to the rim like that. Now, I'm not going to try and argue and say Bam Adebayo does plenty of other things. You know, he rebounds, he gets assists, he's an excellent rim protector for this Miami Heat team. But I will say in this case, I think the Kelly Olynyk factor especially kind of threw off the Lakers' defensive matchups a little bit. And you're seeing how effective he's been in these last two games. But I think the Lakers are going to adjust for that in game four. I think you're going to see more of Markieff Morris and maybe less of a Dwight Howard, especially if Miami stays small and doesn't go back to Bam Adebayo. So we'll see what happens. But it's an interesting matchup issue with Kelly Olynyk there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I do want to say, I mean, you bring up a good point in terms of spacing the floor, right? I mean, JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, you want to keep them out of the paint as much as possible because they're very strong rim protectors. And to that point, I think the key for the
Mm-hmm.
Heat here, especially if Bam Adebayo returns for Game 4, is they need to be effective in transition. Okay, they need to go, go, go. As Bam Adebayo is, I believe he's 6'8", so he's not a big guy in terms of for a five, and so if they can run the floor effectively, I think that that's their strength, and I think that will be their strength if they get Bam Adebayo back. But you're right, in a half court set with Bam Adebayo not being a 3-point threat, I mean it definitely creates a slight issue in terms of how are we going to effectively score in the paint. Uh, but I will say I think that they still have effective spacing with obviously the other four players on the floor, most likely being
Mm-hmm.
solid 3-point shooters. So, I mean, we'll see what happens again. But you brought up a really good point with that the rim protectors and McGee and Howard, and we'll see how they can overcome that. But Trevor, before we move on, I wanted to ask, like, at this stage, like, are you gonna stick with your 6 games, Lakers in 6, or would you like to make
I
a
am.
revision?
Yeah. I'm going to stick to Lakers in six. I wouldn't be surprised if Miami took game four. I'm going to stick to Lakers in six. I actually don't. I'm back and forth on who's going to win game four, if I'm being completely honest. I think the Lakers are going to take game four, so maybe the series goes five. But just because I'm already on the record saying Lakers in six, I'll stick to it.
Yeah, I mean, there you go. I think that's a very accurate prediction. For me, I mean, I said Lakers in 7, and that's not looking great right now. But I think if the Heat can win Game 4, I think it goes 7 games. If the Heat lose Game 4, I think it goes 6 games max. And I know that's kind of like, okay, you're saying the obvious here, but I don't want to stray too far from my original prediction. I'm going to try to stick with it.
Right.
Hopefully, Bam Adebayo plays in Game 4. I think that gives the Heat a much better shot at reaching 7
And
games. Yeah,
one final point
of
on
course.
this. To anybody who thought, whoever thought this was going to be a sweep is dumb. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
straight dumb. The Miami Heat are not a bad team. They
Mhm.
beat the Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games. They basically swept the Milwaukee Bucks, who had the MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year. They swept a good Indiana Pacers team. They beat a very, very talented young Boston team in 6 games. This is a really, really good Miami team that earned their way here. And the fact that they won game three and Jimmy Butler went off, yeah, is great. They've earned that right. They've earned that right to be in this series. And let's not overreact. It was a great game. I still think the Lakers are going to win the series, but Miami deserves to be here. And we should also emphasize that. And they are going to be a great team for years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. So I kind of got caught up in that sentiment after game 2, kind of like, oh man, like these finals, like, is it really going to be a sweep? Like the Miami Heat they seem to
Right.
just be outclassed. And I forgot why I thought the Heat were originally going to win the East in the first place. I mean, I've said it for months, and even I forgot. I mean, you're right. The Heat are a really well coached team. They're a really good all around team, and people are disrespecting them, particularly after game 2. And people were reminded in game 3, shorthanded Miami Heat team beat the Lakers. People are reminded why they made the finals in the first place. So you made a really good point there. Before we move on, I know we keep saying this. I want to say one more thing that I found really interesting, and it's kind of unrelated to the finals, but it's related to the Lakers and LeBron. Rajon Rondo made a comment the other day talking about how I believe earlier in the season or last season he told LeBron like you need to
Mm-hmm.
fix up. I believe he said you need to fix up your emotions on the court or your attitude on the court in regards to your facial expressions and just like your how you're viewed because he said last season, especially with Kuzma and Brandon Ingram on the floor, he said that they would look at him for everything. So every time they missed a few shots or missed an open shot, and they look back and they see LeBron like shaking his head or having his head down in like kind of like disgust or disappointment, they felt horrible, and it just drained all their confidence out, and it just like really hurt the team. And I thought it was a really great point by Rondo. And I mean, I think that that's really telling. And he said if they made a few shots and they looked at LeBron and he was like, nodding his head or something, they just have a ton of confidence. So he said, LeBron, you got to shape up and you got to be like that all the time. Be upbeat all the time. Be positive all the time, even if you don't feel it for your young guys. So they have confidence in themselves. So they don't lose faith in themselves. And I thought that was just a uh, really good statement by Rondo because it's very true. A lot of these players look up to LeBron, and rightfully so.
I'm glad you brought that up, and you got to give Rondo a lot of credit because it takes a big man to go to LeBron
Yeah.
James and call him out. I mean, I can't name another person who's done that in the last 5 years. I mean, kudos to Rajon Rondo, and he was absolutely right. LeBron James was a poor leader last year for the Lakers. There was a lot of young guys, Kuzma, Josh Hart, Brandon Ingram, guys they ended up trading away, ironically.
Mm.
But look, LeBron, everyone looked up to LeBron on that team. Everyone who plays with LeBron looks up to LeBron. So LeBron can't be shaking his head. He can't be pouting. He can't be, walking away from teammates. He has to be that vocal leader. He has to be that upbeat guy because his energy feeds into everybody else. And I'm very glad Rajon Rondo, publicly came out with that because that is a really interesting story. And that's why you have guys like Rajon Rondo on a championship team, a veteran guy who will call out a LeBron James. And look at what Rondo's doing in the playoffs for the Lakers. He's been huge for them, especially in these last couple rounds. So great point. Glad you threw that in there.
Yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting. So I think, Trevor, are we good to move on to the NFL?
Let's talk some football.
All
Let's
right,
talk some
yeah.
football.
So we wanted to talk about the games this past week, and as we all know, it was kind of a chaotic week leading up to the games, with the Tennessee Titans having a bunch of positive coronavirus tests, having their game
Mm-hmm.
postponed. Luckily, today, Monday, the Titans had their first day with no more new positives, so that's a very positive development. And the Patriots had Cam Newton test positive. Now, luckily, no one else on their team tested positive, and they were able to play the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday night tonight instead of yesterday afternoon. So that was good, but a little bit of a scare. But glad the NFL seemed to get through it and seemed like they weathered the storm pretty well, similar to baseball a few months back. But moving on from that, we wanted to talk about some games. Now there were a lot of good games this week. Again, it seemingly offenses can't be stopped in this league this year. I think it's at a historic rate in terms
Right.
of touchdowns and points this season. And with that, I wanted to start off by talking about yet again my Cleveland Browns. Moving to 3-1 on the season with a 49-38 win over the Dallas Cowboys. Now, there's two different storylines here. For me, as I've said before in the past few months, the Browns and the Cowboys were in very similar situations in regards to having a ton of talent, ton of top of the line talent, just not being able to quite put it together. And like the coach was the missing link, or it was always like, oh, this player's the missing link, or this aspect of the team. Well, now, I mean, we're a quarter away through the season, and the Cowboys are 1-3, and the Cleveland Browns are 3-1. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, I think at the end of the day, it's a coaching difference. And you saw that on Sunday. The Cleveland Browns offense is unstoppable, or was unstoppable for the majority of the game. Put up 49 and ran for over 300 yards against the Dallas Cowboys without Nick Chubb. Like that, it's just. I mean, if you're a Dallas Cowboys fan or a Dallas Cowboys defensive player, that's just absolutely horrible, and you should be you just disgusted with that effort and that play. But the credit the
Mm-hmm.
Browns, the offensive line in particular. I wanted to call out Wyatt Teller, Jedrick Wills, the rookie. The whole offensive line has been playing spectacularly, and Odell Beckham Jr. finally had his coming out game where he absolutely tore up the Cowboys. Had a great 50-yard run to seal the deal with 3 minutes left, and all around it was just a great performance on offense. And I mean, I'll ask you in a second, Trevor, on your thoughts, but I just want to say one more thing on the Cowboys in the sense of like they need to figure this out. I mean, I feel like they get behind early with some turnovers. The Cowboys are -8, I believe, in turnover differential in the season, which is just a recipe
Yeah,
for
Zeke had a fumble again, I believe, yesterday as well.
yep, yep. Prescott had a fumble as well, and it's just a recipe for disaster. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's how you lose games. And the Cleveland Browns have the most points off turnovers in football this year, I believe, with 45 points off turnovers. So there's the difference between the two teams.
Wow.
And it's just well coached versus sloppy play. And the Cowboys got to figure it out. I mean, I think that if they don't start winning some games soon, I mean, I don't know what they're gonna do. It's just it's disappointing. Trevor, any thoughts on this game?
Well, I think the defensive coordinator is on a burning hot seat right now because the Dallas Cowboys defense is just, I mean, horrendously bad. I got to give a lot of credit to the Browns offense too, though, because Stefanski has done what people have said to do in the past, and he's executed really well. The Browns are a dynamic running football team with Chubb, who's now hurt for a few weeks, but then you have Kareem Hunt, who's also a very dynamic running back. You take the load off Baker and you let Baker be a game manager. And I think the Browns have done a very good job of that the last 3 weeks. I didn't give them much credit for beating the Washington football team and the Bengals. I will give them some more credit this week. I thought they looked really good on offense, especially. They did, give up the lead a little bit, but it's hard to keep your foot on the gas when you're up by 30 points. Um, Baker looked good. I thought Kareem Hunt looked really good. Chubb looked good, even though he got hurt pretty early on. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like if you're a Cleveland Browns fan right now. You're 3-1. Your schedule isn't that much harder going forward. I know you have a couple easy games, especially coming up. So the Browns looked great, and I'll give them some credit. They're 3-1, and I think this is, especially in a weird season, we've seen some weird things. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns made the playoffs, especially with that third wild card spot. So I don't want to jump the gun too early, but they're looking very good right now.
Yeah, there we go. And one more thing before we move on, I just want to also give credit to Stefanski to just fantastic coaching job thus far this season. Just the difference between him and Hugh Jackson and Freddie Kitchens. And to me, it's just I'm going to bring it down to a simple thing real quick, and it's managing the timeouts. And this might be a really simple thing to a lot of people, but the problem with Hugh Jackson and Freddie Kitchens is they wouldn't manage the timeouts very well. They'd save them till a minute left, and they just have no time to
I
move the
don't
ball
think
down the
that's the
field.
only
It's
problem,
not.
but sure.
It's not by any means. I'm just pointing out one specific thing that I think that Browns fans are
Gotcha.
relieved
Okay.
of because coaching has been a problem for the Browns for 20 years, for my entire life. And for the Browns to finally have a coach who can at least manage the clock and call like well-designed plays and not run four verts on 2nd and 3 from your own 20, like it's a relief as you know to have a
That's kind of
coach that's
funny.
actually yeah to have a coach that's actually competent, calling smart plays, confident in his players, and is smart with clock management. So just simple things that most people take for granted, but the Browns are finally doing well, and we'll see if they can keep it up. So I guess we talked about
There
that
we
game
go.
a good amount,
Enough
but
about enough about the
yeah.
Cleveland Browns. We talk about them too much,
we,
anyways. It's
we
okay.
really do.
I'm just kidding.
My
I'm just kidding.
apologies, but it was a big game. So Trevor, yeah, what game do you want to talk about?
And for no particular reason do I really want to talk about this game, other than the fact that there was a lot to talk about after the game was over, and that's the Broncos and the Jets. And I just thought this was an interesting game from start to finish. You saw some dynamic offensive plays. Jerry Judy, Sam Darnold had a dynamic play as well in that game. And I just thought it was very interesting at the end where I believe Adam Gase took a couple unnecessary timeouts. There was a couple cheap shots to Brett Ripien Jr.
Mm.
And then Vic Fangio tells his guys not to shake hands. He yells, "Go straight to the locker room." And I thought that was a little interesting because that it takes a lot to not shake hands in the National Football League. I feel like you literally see that after every game, shaking hands, guys talking to each other. So clearly there was some bad blood there, and I'm going to side with Vic Fangio because there's no excuse for what Adam Gase did. I mean, calling this the dumbest timeouts I've ever seen, and then players taking very high shots at Brett Ripien Jr. I think it's a little nasty, and I think it's a little dirty, and I think Vic Fangio was a little frustrated, especially when the game was pretty much decided at that point. But there's not much more to say out of that. Two awful football teams. I mean, Denver's beat up by injuries, but two bad football teams. And my respect went up for Vic Fangio a little bit, and I hope Adam Gase gets fired even faster than he already will.
Yeah.
But Ryan, I'll hand it off to you to give a real quick thought if you even
Yeah,
have any on this game.
yeah, I'm just gonna give a quick comment. I mean, I think we all think Adam Gase deserves to be fired. I mean, that guy is just, I just don't see any hope for this Jets team while he's the head coach. There's not really much else to say. And in regards to the Broncos, they've been destroyed by injuries, but Jerry Jeudy just showed again how talented he is with just the concentration on his, I believe it was like a 48-yard touchdown catch. Listen, Trevor's laughing because I have him on my fantasy team. But Jerry Jeudy, first round pick from Alabama, he's looking real good. So we'll see what happens if Drew Lock comes back. See if maybe there can be some more consistency on this offense. Melvin Gordon had a great game,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. We'll see what happens with the Broncos. But to me, the Jets are just I can barely even watch the Jets. They're just such a terrible team. It's really sad. But moving on from that
I
game.
already know they're about to get their first win next season against my Cardinals, so watch out for
Oh
that.
no,
But
don't
time to move on. time to move on. Time to move on to
Yeah.
your next game.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next
Uh,
game here. And
this was an entertaining one, so I'm looking forward to talking about this one for a bit.
you're talking about the Los Angeles Chargers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Trevor. Is that the game you're talking about? Yeah. I mean,
Entertaining, really good game.
this
I
game
thought it
was
was a
really
good game.
entertaining, and I think the storyline here is just Brady's not done. I mean, people disrespect Brady. They continually do. They lost week 1 to the Saints. Everyone's like, "Oh, I mean, the Buccaneers don't look great. What's happened to Brady? He's not looking like the Hall of Fame best quarterback of all time like he normally does." Give him a few weeks against a solid pass defense in the Chargers, and he puts up 5 touchdowns, 370 yards, and 1 interception.
Yeah.
I mean, he went right back to the Brady that we know. And I want to point out Justin Herbert, a rookie out of Oregon. He's starting off the year really well, with Tyrod going down early, similar to how Baker started off his rookie season. Herbert comes in, and
Mm-hmm.
he's been playing quite well, kept him in the game with the Chiefs, and kept him in the game here against the Buccaneers. Threw a pick on the final drive, but I mean, listen, young guys, they'll learn. But he had 3 touchdowns, 290 yards, and I want to say I believe he has 2 touchdowns this season with two 75-yard touchdowns this season. He's the only quarterback to have that, I believe, in the NFL. Which I mean, that's a kind of a random stat, but it just shows that Herbert's capable of that big play. And I think that the Chargers have found a solid quarterback here. And Trevor, you and I have continually doubted Herbert. But watching him, to me, he seems to have poise. He
We
seems
did.
to know what he's doing, and he seems to throw with pretty good accuracy. So we'll see if they can start to win some
Mm-hmm.
games. But I was really encouraged by what I saw from Justin Herbert. Trevor, do you have any thoughts on this game?
No, I really agree with everything you just said. I mean, Tom Brady looked great, threw for 5 touchdowns, although Mike Evans and OJ Howard are both banged up after yesterday's game.
Yeah.
To combine that with Chris Godwin already being injured, that'll be interesting to see how that will play out in the next couple weeks. But yeah, Brady looked great. And I wanted to spend more time talking about Justin Herbert because I've loved what I've seen from Justin Herbert.
Mm.
He looks fearless. You know, he's big in the pocket. He has a great arm. He's a mobile guy. He can run. He hasn't really shown that too much yet. But yeah, you mentioned the big plays, the ability to throw the ball downfield. He had 2 touchdown passes of over 50 yards yesterday. He had a
Yep.
72-yard touchdown and a 53-yard touchdown pass. So for me, that just shows that the Chargers aren't holding back. The Chargers aren't throwing a bunch of screens. They're not throwing a bunch of slants. They're letting Justin Herbert get after it. They're letting him throw the ball downfield, and it's paying dividends. I mean, they put up 31 points. He threw 80% completion percentage. The defense let him down a little bit yesterday, and the defense is supposed to be the strong point on that team. But
Mm.
I've loved what I've seen from Justin Herbert. Tom Brady's looked great, and I think Tampa Bay. I think Tampa Bay is a better team than Green Bay overall. And I think Tampa Bay has asserted themselves, not asserted themselves, but I really think it's going to be Tampa Bay or Seattle coming out of the NFC based on what I've seen so far this season.
Mm. Yeah, and you
Just a
know,
little bit of a future prediction.
there you go. And you made a good point. I want to say OJ Howard did tear his Achilles, so he's out for the season. That's a tough injury. And Mike Evans is banged up, and Chris Godwin also banged up with a hamstring injury. So you're right. It'll be interesting to see, particularly because Brady and the Bucks have a short week this week, going to play the Chicago Bears on Thursday
Mm-hmm.
night. So we'll see if that affects them at all. I mean, if Leonard Fournette as well misses another game, can Ronald Jones step up? He did this Sunday. We'll see if he can do it next Sunday. But I think all in all, the takeaway is just that Herbert has a lot of potential, and he keeps his team in games, and it seems like he's motivated his team to at least have a better fire and be and compete with some better teams. So we'll see if they can pull out some wins later
Real
this season.
quick, yeah. Real quick before I talk about my second game, Ryan is having a field day with throwing in guys on his fantasy team this episode. I believe he's mentioned, well, the Cleveland Browns, Jerry
Yep.
Judy. Now he
Yep.
throws in Ronald Jones for no apparent reason.
Justin Herbert as well.
Justin Herbert, excuse me, I
Yeah.
forgot one. So
Yeah.
moving on to my second game that I wanted to talk about. And for me, there wasn't too many super exciting games, but
Sure.
I just think this game is interesting because it's a battle of two of the most injured teams in the NFL, and it's the Eagles versus the 49ers.
Mm.
I thought Carson Wentz looked pretty good with what he had. He had a beautiful throw to a no-name receiver. I don't even know what the hell that guy's name was for a big 40-yard touchdown late in that game. Nick Mullins might have thrown the worst pass you've ever seen in NFL history. And I just want to talk about big picture for the Philadelphia Eagles, leading the division right now through 4 games at 1-2-1.
My
The
goodness.
Cowboys and the Redskins are 1-3, and the Giants remain winless at 0-4. And it's crazy to me, as bad as the Dallas Cowboys have looked, if the Eagles can get a little bit healthier and maybe Carson Wentz plays a little bit better, it, I mean, I think Philadelphia, based on what I've seen, I think Philadelphia is in a better position to win this division than the Dallas Cowboys. Just because Dallas for me is so sloppy at the beginning of football games, and that's coaching. You have to have your guys ready to play. And I think Philadelphia will get a little bit better throughout the year. I think they're going to get a little bit healthier throughout the year. I'm hoping they can get some receivers down the stretch. They got Miles Sanders back. And I'm telling you, I think Philadelphia might steal this division from Dallas. But again, it's early. I might be overreacting. But, it's just a counterfeit playoff team coming out of the NFC East, It's starting to become a theme in the NFL, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yep, it's a bit of an issue. And I know we're talking about the Eagles and the Niners here, but I wanted to mention the NFC East because you're talking about them. I really think that I have a hard time betting against the Cowboys. They're just so talented on paper. It shouldn't be possible that they're struggling this badly. But you're right. I mean, the Eagles are first place right now, and I don't think it's overreacting when the Cowboys are averaging almost 37 points per game allowed in the last, I believe, this whole season. It's just abysmal or in the last
Mm-hmm.
three games. I mean, they gave up 49 to the Browns, they gave up 39 to the Falcons, and they gave up 35 to the Seahawks. I mean, this is just it's pathetic.
38, I think.
Or
Yeah.
38. Yeah, okay. Sorry. But yeah, regardless, it's nearly 40 points a game in the last 3 weeks given up by their defense, and it's just really sad. It's just pathetic. So, but talking about the Eagles, Niners, I think Nick Mullins was just absolutely abysmal. You said one of the worst throws you'll ever see. He had a QBR of 13, so it was really, really pathetic.
Wow.
CJ Beathard came in the game. I mean, he was fine. I mean, they actually almost came back and won this game. It came down to a Hail Mary, and I don't know if you saw, but there were multiple receivers down there for the Niners. They almost pulled this one out. Imagine that backbreaker for the Eagles, but luckily it fell incomplete, and the Niners lost. I think that the Niners might be in trouble here at 2-2 just because how difficult their division is, and to an extent their
Mm-hmm.
whole conference. I mean, it's a very difficult conference, very top heavy, but very difficult. So we'll see how they can respond if they can get healthier, if Raheem Mostert can come back or Jimmy Garoppolo can come back. But it's a tough loss. It really is a tough pill to swallow, and especially knowing you would win this game if you were healthy. And one final point.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Brandon Ayuk, a lot of potential. Really nice player. I think he had four forced missed tackles on 3 touches. Which like get this guy the ball more. I mean, he is as elusive as anyone
Yeah.
out there on your team. I mean, get this guy the ball as much as you can, or at least as much as you can without making it, obvious. I mean, try to scheme him open, try to do whatever you can. I know Shanahan's one of the best offensive play callers out there, so he'll try to get him open, obviously. But get this guy the ball. I mean, he flashed a
Mm-hmm.
lot of potential yesterday. So that's my take on that game. And
I agree with most of what you said there.
yeah, I mean, Trevor, so if you don't mind, I'm just gonna bring up one last game here before we move on.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
It's
Let's
just gonna
talk
be
about it.
yeah, it's just gonna be a real quick point. I just want to talk about the Patriots Chiefs and the fact that this game was always gonna be the Chiefs game to lose, especially with Cam Newton out with coronavirus. But I want to talk about just the Patriots. It's just really unfortunate. They got continually unlucky with terrible penalty calls, 2 dropped interceptions, hit both of their hands on two.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Mahomes just threw it right to the defender, and it was just dropped. It was terrible. And then another time, there was a fumble by Patrick Mahomes. Bill Belichick was too busy yelling at the ref to throw the challenge flag, and the Chiefs kept the ball. And it's just like the little things like that, like Bill Belichick missing an opportunity to get the ball, is just really rare for
That'll
him.
never happen again.
Yeah, it's a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
really rare mistake by him. And one last thing, Julian Edelman's got to stop the drops. I mean, a ball went straight through his hands on just a quick a route in the flat, hit both of his hands and just slipped out and into Tyrann Matthews' hands for a pick six. Plays like that, especially when you have Jarrett Stidham under center, is just a backbreaker. So the veterans got to step up on this team, and we'll see if they can bounce back. But I just wanted to address that real quick.
Yeah, and here are my thoughts on this game. And I think this entire week was really weird for New England and Kansas City.
Mhm.
Everything being thrown off with Cam Newton getting injured. Now you have to put together a whole different game plan for Brian Hoyer and Jarrett Stidham. The game gets moved to a Monday night versus being played on Sunday. And you talk about the little things. To me, it just seemed like the very weird week, the very weird schedule caused those little things. I just think everything was really thrown off. Both teams were really sloppy. Both teams didn't seem like super, I don't want to say engaged, but they didn't seem super sharp. And I think it was
Yep.
just the weird uncertainty of whether you're going to play the game on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or not at all. I think threw everything off. And you could tell there were a lot of mistakes by both teams, coaching and playing. And I wouldn't expect this to be a theme going forward, especially when Cam Newton comes back. New England will be fine. Kansas City will be fine going forward, obviously. So, yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, but I wouldn't read into it too much. It's just a case of coronavirus messing up this game a little bit, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. And Casey's still undefeated, so they're doing just fine. They're
They're
moving on.
rolling.
Yep. So I mean, I think if we're good talking about that game, I think we're done with the NFL talk. And I think Trevor, I think we wanted to talk a little bit about college football. I know we haven't talked a lot
Long
about it.
overdue. We haven't much talked about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we wanted to give a little bit of an update on our thoughts on some of these games that have transpired over the last week or two. And Trevor, I mean, what game did you want to bring up? What did you want to talk about? And yeah.
I'll talk about the supposed game of the weekend, even though it looked like a varsity versus JV game.
Okay.
And I know Ryan's going to be upset. Family affiliation to Auburn, but the Auburn Georgia game was an interesting game for me. I watched most of the second half and a little bit of the first half in this one. And I just thought, and my big takeaway was how dominant Georgia was in the trenches. I mean, you look at the running statistics, for example. Auburn has 22 rush attempts for 39 yards. That is awful. And then Georgia ran the ball 45 times for 202 yards, which isn't necessarily crazy efficient, but it just shows you that Georgia kind of gave Auburn the beat down at the line of scrimmage. They didn't force Stetson Bennett to throw the ball that much. And man, that Georgia defense is going to be scary this season. The SEC is going to be really interesting in general, if we want to talk about that for a second. But
Hmm.
Georgia looked really good. Auburn, I think, has some issues at the quarterback position. I know Ryan will touch on his thoughts on Bo Nix, but Bo Nix, 21 of 40, 50% completion percentage through an interception. Didn't really do anything on the ground either. So I think Auburn, a little bit of a wake up call. And in a really, really good SEC, wouldn't be surprised if Auburn lost probably 3 games this year, considering they have to play Alabama, LSU. I think, do they have to play Florida? I'm not sure if they have to play Florida, but
I don't think we do this year, no.
But yeah, really tough SEC. And Georgia made a case that they're legit this year. So if they can get Bennett to get a little bit more comfortable, get a little bit more reps on the offense, Georgia's going to be a tough team to beat this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, I try to look at the bright side as kind of an Auburn fan, but there's really not much to be happy about or take away from this game other than my main takeaway was just Bo Nix. I really don't think he's the answer. And I think Gus Malzahn really has to think about it. And I know he's only a sophomore. I know he was a true freshman last year. I know, it takes a while to evolve and become a solid SEC quarterback, particularly in the SEC West, but he just continually makes sloppy plays. The accuracy's not there. He can't hit his receivers when they're open. He bails on pockets that don't need to be bailed on, and he just can't make throws over the middle of the field. It's all short passes within 10 yards, can never throw deep down the middle of the field, and when he does, it's not
Mm-hmm.
accurate. So that's just the main takeaway for me. And also, you're totally right. The battle of the trenches, the lines, the offensive line, the defensive line of Auburn got outclassed. The offensive line just couldn't get any push whatsoever. The Georgia D line just dominated them. And on the other side of the ball,
Mm-hmm.
Auburn has been known for years to have a dominant defensive line, one of the best in the country. Last year, Derek Brown. I mean, in the past, we've also had Carl Lawson, a multitude of other really solid defensive ends, and they're gone now. They're all in the NFL,
Mm-hmm.
and that showed. I mean, there was no one who really stepped up there, and when there was pressure, the quarterback got away, and he managed to convert on a pass down the field. And so it all just seemed to go wrong for Auburn and all seemed to go right for Georgia. And you're right. I mean, Georgia showed they can contend with the best, and that's what they did, and that's what they will probably continue to do. So Auburn does have some soul
Mm-hmm.
searching to see if Bo Nix is the guy, and we'll see where they go from here, see how they bounce back. But before we end, I wanted to end with one more game and another SEC game, and it's Florida and South Carolina. Now, I know this might not be the most interesting game on paper, seeing as South Carolina is now 0-2 and the Gators are the third in the country at 2-0, and they won by double digits. But I think the key storyline here is just the Florida Gators in general. I mean, this team looks really, really good. And, I had my doubts seeing as they lost a bunch of solid players on offense and defense this past season, but they've shown that they can hang around with the best, as Georgia did. Kyle Trask has been sensational. He had 4 touchdowns in this one. And Kyle Pitts, I want to talk about him for a second. He has been spectacular. He had 2 touchdowns in this game. He had 4 touchdowns last week. He has 6 touchdowns through 2 games. I mean, that's unbelievable for one receiver to have 6 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think overall that this Florida offense is really, really dangerous. And I think that they're a team to watch out for, not only in the playoff, but to be an early favorite to win the national title. I know it's really early. I know some conferences hasn't played at all
Yeah.
yet, but Florida looks really dangerous to me. And if they can keep this up, I mean, the sky's the limit for them.
Yeah, I'll touch on Florida real quick. I didn't really watch this game, if I'm being completely honest. I will say this: Florida probably has played their 2 easiest games on their schedule, with the except. I take that back. They have to play Arkansas and Vanderbilt. Never mind. Their
Easier
schedule
games.
will pick up. Was the point of that? Yeah, their schedule will pick up a little bit. So we'll see how they do this week against a decent Texas A&M team.
Hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. I really could see Florida running the table here. They don't have to play Alabama. They don't have to play Auburn. The toughest team they have to play from the West is LSU, who doesn't really look that good this year, in my opinion, anyways.
Mm.
I think the game of the year, actually, do they even have to play? Yeah, okay, they do have to play Georgia. So I think the game of the year on November 7th in the SEC, maybe not in the SEC, but in the SEC East will definitely be that Georgia-Florida game on November 7th. So yeah, Florida looked really good. A little interesting storyline as well. Jim Fisher talked of threatening Kyle Pitts, Ryan, who just mentioned ahead of their contest. Haven't looked into that too much, but obviously the word threat is quite interesting, especially when it comes from a coach talking about an opposing player.
Wow.
So we'll see how that whole storyline plays out. And yeah, I love what I've seen from Florida. We'll see how they do against better competition, but if you're a Gators fan, you're probably really happy right now.
Yeah, no, no.
Happier than a Wildcat fan.
Oh man, without a doubt, if you're a Florida Gators fan, you are quite happy right now, and it should be a fun season for you. Um, but yeah, I mean, with that, I think is that about it, Trevor? I think that's about it.
That is about it. I did save two real quick things. They're both college football related for the end of the podcast.
Of course.
I want to give a shout out to Arkansas, their first SEC conference win in 1,300 days. They beat Mississippi State over the weekend.
Wow.
And I want to give another shout out to all Texas Longhorn fans out there that Texas is back for the 8th year in a row, losing as a top 10 team to an unranked opponent at home. So congratulations to the Texas Longhorns. They are officially back, losing another game at home that they should have won.
Yeah.
Those are the two things I wanted to say. But Arkansas, man,
Wow.
contenders.
There you go. I wanted to, you know what? While you're shouting stuff out, I'll shout something out too. I want to say Texas, in classic fashion, is overrated once again. Them and USC always overrated. And Texas, as you said, lost once again to an unranked team. And maybe they'll end the year with another 3 or 4 losses like they did last year. I wouldn't be surprised.
Exactly.
And one more thing, I just wanted to shout out my boy Damian Harris. Came on to the scene really
Oh
well
my
tonight.
God.
Had 100 rush yards against the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's looking really good. Keep an eye out. Keep an eye out for him. I think he'll be the new starter in New England. So there you go. And with that, I think that just about does podcast number 21. Trevor, it was good, and we'll be back next week with some more.
I got nothing left to say.
We'll be back with some more basketball and football talk. And thanks everyone for watching. We'll be back.